Hello everyone, this is Jose from newbreview, and today I'm going to be reviewing Juarez Gunslinger. Juarez Gunslinger is the latest addition to the Juarez series from Techland. It's something of a redemption with respect to the previous game in the series, Juarez the Cardinal, which was, well, the least we dignified with commentary, the better, but it was downright atrocious, not so much because of being a bad game, as it was just somewhat mediocre, but rather because of the amazing fails in research and the joke that the game made of a fairly gruesome and still active conflict. Juarez Gunslinger is a comeback to the roots of the series, coming back to a Western theme with all that implies. The framing story of Juarez Gunslinger is actually quite interesting, even if cliched. The setup is that an old bounty hunter from the West, Silas Greaves, arrives in a tavern in Kansas and starts telling stories of his days as a young bounty hunter. Stories become more and more incredible as the game progresses, with all the patrons in the bar basically starting to shake their heads in disbelief. What this means for the game is that the usual trappings of a Western story are actually quite appropriate, as you are seeing the action as what the other bar patrons are imagining when Silas is telling his stories, facing down endless bands of Indians, and even fighting in a minefield of explosives. Everything is very cliched, but it is the point. It's basically reveling in the fun that is the cliche of the Western. And it does so in a very stylish manner. The gimmick or the principal trait of the game, which is actually very interesting, and I'm surprised that other games don't do it, is that because Silas is such an unreliable narrator, things in the story change as he's telling it. Enemies change from Indians to outlaws in just an eye wink.
Yep, the Apaches always appeared out of nowhere, and there never seemed to be an end to it. Hold on, were you attacked by Apaches? What happened to the cowboys? Did I say they were Apaches? I said Clanton's cowboys attacked me Apache style. I was in a pitched battle, but I was holding my own against an overwhelming enemy force.
Not only that, but the scenarios are modified with openings, ladders, new bits of cover, places where you can find ammunition, and etc. just because Silas is changing what things as he's telling the story. While it might not sound as much, and it might actually sound as like a silly gimmick, it actually is very fun and very engaging, because it works so well with the framing device of the old man telling this absolutely incredible story. And it keeps you engaged even in those times when you see that it obviously has been used to reduce development times and reuse levels. For example, there is one level that you actually have to play 3 times, because each person in the tavern tells the story in a different way, and you play all 3 of them. It sounds like a cop-out, but it's actually not. It feels like something different, and you are so engaged in what these people are telling and how they differ from one another that you keep going and going from gunfight to gunfight, just waiting to see what's the next absolutely ridiculous thing that is going to happen in this absolutely impossible story. Apart from the story, which is, as mentioned, very engaging, the game is workable, and I actually would say quite good, considering that it has a Western theme, and obviously there is some things that it cannot do. You cannot go in this game expecting multitude of weapons and having very creative weapons, because that doesn't happen in a Western. You have your revolvers, you have your shotguns, you have your rifles, and that's about it. And frankly, you don't really need much else. The weapons have the appropriate feel to them, and there's variety even in those limited categories. For example, there's 3 kinds of revolvers, each of them having more speed or more power than the previous one, with the 6-shooter being your standard Western revolver. To spice things up, the game actually gives you special abilities as you level up through killing enemies. The more stylish you are in eliminating enemies and the longer chain combos you achieve, the more XP you have, the more abilities you can get. These abilities change the game in just the right way, allowing you to dual wield your revolvers, extending your concentration time, or like simply making it easy to chain combos. Speaking of concentration time, the main mechanic Silas has to dispatch his enemies is the concentration mechanic, which is something like a bullet time. It actually has some neat additions. For example, it colors enemies red and makes the rest of the backgrounds gray, which makes it very easy to change your shots very fast. It also allows you to sidestep bullets, though you actually have a mechanic that allows you to defy death, and if a bullet was supposed to kill you, you can dodge it as like a reflex action at the last minute to move away and survive for that moment. But this ability takes a bit longer to recharge. As you level up, you actually unlock new styles and new uses for your concentrations. Like for example, you can unlock an execution mode, which just starts chaining you headshot after headshot, just as long as you have concentration charge and there are enemies inside. It makes the game a bit easy, but it's still very cool that you can unlock stuff like that. Besides, as the difficulty raises in the game, the shootouts start being so massive that even with advantages like these ones, you are still gonna bite the dust quite often. You couldn't have a Western game with duels, and I'm proud to say that Gunslinger has its duels, and they are actually quite smartly done, but they are a bit annoying to play. How it works is that you have to keep your targeting reticule on top of your enemy, and this allows you to focus, and it will mean how much, or rather how precise your aim is gonna be once you finally unsheath your revolver and shoot. Your speed will determine how fast you pull your revolver out, and this is the more annoying of the ones, because you need to keep your hand close to your revolver, but it's less obvious that you're doing it right as with the focus and the reticule on top of the enemy. You need to keep pressing left or right to increase the percentage of your speed and basically how close your hand is to your holster. But yeah, it's odd, and most of the time the best idea is just to keep pressing left and just keep an eye on if it's going down or it's going up, and only pressing the other direction when you notice it's going down. Still, it's a nice addition, and you actually have a duels mode as part of the arcade mode, where you can test your aim and reflexes against a variety of gangsters and outlaws of the Wild West. There's also some Mexican standoffs, which is something that I found really original and really new. It's basically the same mechanic, but you need to shift between two targets, making it insanely difficult, but at the same time, very cool. In a move that I believe is to redeem themselves because of the massive research fail that happened with Call of Juarez the Cartel, this game is actually delightfully researched, and you can feel and see that the people behind it really liked Old West stories and were intrigued by it and really wanted to represent it in the game. Because even if the game and what happens in the game is absolutely impossible and it's basically just the fantasy of an old man, it does have some nuggets of truth. And in fact, there are collectibles in all stages that are called nuggets of truth. Mind you, finding these nuggets of truth is sometimes quite frustrating, and how they tie up with the story is not always clear, but they basically share stories, like real stories of the Wild West and what happened to their inhabitants. For example, if in one level somebody mentions Wyatt Earp, you might find in that level a collectible that gives you the real story of Wyatt Earp, and so you can compare to, well, the fantasy that Silas is weaving to what was the real thing. If you have any interest at all in history, the Wild West, or you're simply intrigued to understand how the fantasies in the game tie up to the real events, finding this it's a delight. And it's always fun to stop and read the stories that they tell about the real Wild West and what it actually happened. Speaking about style, the game is actually quite stylish. Graphics and aesthetics-wise, well, the game is quite competent. The scenarios are quite generic and the textures are quite generic, but this is a Western. What do you expect? You have derelict old town in the west, mine, desert. You have a sawmill while it's raining, which I thought it was kind of original. But, I mean, you know what you're getting through. You have your train assault, mine shafts, etc., etc., etc. There is cool enough variety because you basically have all of the tropes and cliches of the Wild West here. So if you like them, you are gonna feel right at home. But again, if you're looking for some originality in level design, probably not the best place to look. Still, the game, as mentioned, is quite stylish. It wears its cliched Western attire with pride, and many things that happen in the game are, well, a callback to the old movies. silly things like, for example, when Silas makes a very good kill, he might actually blow out the smoke of his guns. Or how people throw the sticks of dynamite at you instead of something more modern, and how can you actually intercept them and even send them back if you have the right skill. Considering that Gunslinger is a budget title that is available in both the PlayStation Network, Xbox Live Arcade, and also in Steam, where we actually got this game in the summer sale, wink wink, it is impressive what Techland has done with it, and frankly I would have paid way more than the 8 quid I paid for it, and I would do it again. It has my most sincere recommendation, and if you liked westerns, if you are intrigued by how an unreliable narrator can change the pace of a story and how can they change the levels of a story, or if you just want a somewhat different shooter from the norm because you have to rely on someone slower and different weapons and more on your special abilities as a daring and deathly gunslinger, by all means give it a go. You will not be disappointed. This is hats off, guys. Well done. This is Jose, signing off.
Thank you for playing. Presented by
Noob Review.